Hi everybody, thank you for joining me today. We are going to be creating another game using Scratch online, and in the game today we are going to be looking at how to use variables, how to create your own variables and talking about what a variable is. We will also be using operators, we'll be using loops, conditional statements and lots of other exciting programming concepts. Now, some of you might have done the maze game last week with me. If you haven't, that's still available on our YouTube channel, so make sure you check out how to create your own maze game using Scratch. This one is going to be a collect the gems game, or you might decide that you want your character to collect something else. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at my finished game that I've already put in the Cartwheels and Creations Studio, and then I will talk you through the steps of how to create your own version of this game. So the first thing that we're going to do is to open up the internet. Hopefully you're already on Scratch and ready to start. If you're not already on Scratch, you need to just type in the website address, which is scratch.mit.edu, and hit enter. You'll then need to sign in on the right hand side, or if you've not yet signed up, then you need to pause this video and you need to get yourself signed up. If you are a child following the video, then you'll need a parent to help you with that because they need to verify your email address and that kind of thing. Please feel free to pause this video at any stage. It may be that you just want to watch the video and then afterwards you want to go back and try and follow along on Scratch. Or it may be that you want to try and follow along as I'm doing it if you have one device to be showing the tutorial and another device to be working on Scratch. So it's completely up to you how you want to go about it. This video will be available afterwards on the YouTube channel to access whenever you like, and also on our website www.cartwheelsandcreations.com, along with some great resource sheets. So all of the screenshots of the programming that I've used in the game are on the website under the videos and resources page. So feel free to go and have a look at those screenshots, or you can obviously look at the screenshots on here and I'm going to show you how. So first of all, type in, once you've logged into Scratch, you're going to type Cartwheels and Creations into the search bar. So Cartwheels, space, and then Creations, and hit enter. Now it won't come up with any projects, but if you click on Studios, you will come to the Cartwheels and Creations Studio. So click on there. I can see some games that some of the other people have created in the past, people that have done our tutorials. So them boys have created this excellent dinosaur game, and I can also see the bunny game and unicorn game that have been created by Diggos. So if anybody else wants to add their finished projects that they've created following these tutorials to this studio at the end, there's an add projects button and you can add any shared projects to the studio. Now this is today's game, it's called Collect the Gems. So you can click on here and we'll just have a quick look at this together. It does make sound, so you will hear it once we start. The instructions are that you have to collect 5 gems before you lose your lives. Move your mouse pointer with the mouse or keypad to move your flying hippo. So instead of using the arrow keys to control the main character, we're using the mouse pointer and it just follows wherever you move your mouse to. And then it says avoid the ghost or you will lose your lives. You don't want to get hit by the ghost. And that's it. So we're going to get started on the game. I'm going to click the green flag to try it out first of all. Yes, I got a gem already. That was lucky. Oh, there we go. Oh, see what happens when he gets me. It makes that noise. Yes, I've done it. So as you can see, my gems were 5 by the end and my lives were down to 1. I had 1 life left. Otherwise it would have come up with a you lose screen. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I created that. If you want to come back at the end to see how I created it, you can always come back to the studio and click on See Inside. And then you'll be able to see all of the programming that I use. So this is my programming for the hippo. As you can see, I've done one massive chunk of programming here. There's programming for my ghost. I've done a couple of different blocks here. Ooh, come across here. This is the programming for my ghost, and then I've got the programming for my crystals or my gems. So come back and look at this if you need to. The programming is quite complicated, but if you follow this tutorial, then you will understand what the programming actually means. Anybody can copy it and put the blocks together, but the important thing is that you actually learn how to do it for yourself. So that's why it's important that you start from the beginning. So I'm just going to press this red button to stop and come out of this. I'm going to go back at the top. And today we're all going to click on create because we're going to be creating something new. If I wanted to go on something I'd done before, I'd go to my username and my stuff, but we're going to click on create. So everybody press create. And then it brings up a brand new project to work on. So for those of you that have done Scratch before, you will remember that all the code is already embedded into these blocks. These blocks are all the different blocks that we're going to put together like a puzzle in the middle here to create our algorithms or our sequences of instructions that our characters will follow. The very first thing we need to do is just to set the stage ready to start. So we need to pick our backdrop and our characters. You may want to pause at this point while you choose your characters and your backdrop. You're going to need a backdrop that you like the look of. You need a character that's going to be your hero, that's going to collect your gems. You need a character that's going to be your villain, that's going to be moving around the screen as an obstacle. And then you need something that you're going to collect. So I'm just going to show you how I did this if you're not sure, but if you do know how to do this already, you can just pause for a moment while you choose your characters or just do it while I'm talking. I'm going to delete sprite 1, this cat, by clicking on the trash can, and then I'm going to click choose a sprite. So I went for animals and I chose the flying hippo, so I'm just going to go for the same one again, but you can choose whichever character you would like. So I'm going to go for this flying hippo. That's my hero. As he's moving all over the screen, I quite like that he flies. Then I'm going to click for another character, and I chose the ghost, which I think was under fantasy. But you can scroll through all if you want to, if you're not sure which one you want. Yes, he wasn't under fantasy. So let's click on all, and I'm just going to go down. Da, 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 da. So again, I could choose whatever villain that I wanted. So I could choose, do you know what, let's have Frank this time, shall we? Should we have the monster? There you go. So I've chosen a different villain this time just to make it slightly different. And then I'm going to choose my thing to collect, which I'm going to go for gems, just so that I don't confuse you by talking about something else this time. So where's my, there we go, crystal it's called. So if I click on that, that's what my hippo needs to collect. So you need 3 things. You need a hero, a villain, and something to collect. Then you need to choose your backdrop. So have a look through all of these backdrops that are there, or if you had a picture you wanted to use, you can upload your own backdrop. I think for this time, let's go for, let's see, shall I do a different one for a change? Let's go, I'm going to go for wetland this time, just to be different. Oh no, that looks a bit busy, doesn't it? I want it to be clear so it's easy to see where the gems are. So something that goes well with what I've chosen. Let's have another look. So you can choose whichever one that you like the look of. I'm going to go for, let's go for stars this time. Okay, so that stands out. You can see that my characters really stand out here, which will make it easier to play the game. So I've gone for the stars backdrop. I'm going to change the size of my characters now. So I'm going to click on my hippo, and at the moment he's size 100. I'm going to half his size. I'm going to make it 50 and press enter. So now my hippo is a good size for the game. I'm going to leave the gems at that size, and my monster also, Frank, I'm going to change his size. So I need to click on Frank and just change the size. Again, I'm just going to go for 50, which is half the size he is now. Enter. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that now. Once you've got this part set up, if you want more than one crystal or more than one gem or more than one whatever you're using, just right click and press duplicate, and that gives you a second one. So now I've got 2 gems that I'm going to use in my game. I'm going to start off by programming my hippo because he has the most complicated programming. So I'm going to click on hippo, And you can see that the hippo appears up here in the corner, and this area here is where we're going to write the script or the algorithms for the hippo to follow. So the very first thing that we need to do is we need to tell the hippo where to start. I always think that this is good practice in a game, because then wherever you move your character to, wherever your character ends up, you always tell your character to come back to the beginning again. So I'm going to go to events. I'm going to say when the green flag is clicked, because that's how we normally start the game. And then I'm going to go to motion, and I'm going to tell my hippo to go to these coordinates, -154, -105, and it tells you that that's where the hippo is now. If you look over here, hippo is highlighted and it says -154, -105. If I move my hippo, you can see that these coordinates change, and they also change in the blocks over here. So you can move him wherever you want him to start, and then select your go-to block. If you go wrong with a block and you don't want a block, just drag it off the edge of the screen like that and select the new block that you want. So now my hippo is starting up in this corner. For this particular game, it doesn't really matter where he starts, but I do want him to start at the opposite side to the monster, because otherwise the monster and the hippo can clash right at the very beginning before you've had a chance to move away. So I'm going to start Frank down in this corner. So if I click on Frank, he's already clicked. You can see him here. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to say when the green flag is clicked, and we're going to tell Frank where we want him to start. So motion, go to, and that's the coordinates where Frank is at the moment. And we can do exactly the same for the crystals. So I'm just going to do that really quickly, and I'm just going to make sure everything starts in a slightly different place on the screen. So events, when the green flag is clicked, and then we're going to choose a go to, and then for the other one, events, when the green flag is clicked, motion, go to, and those coordinates. The fact that the blocks are coloured in different colours really helps when you're trying to put blocks together quickly, because you know that if you need a block that's to do with moving, the motion blocks are blue. I know that the looks blocks are purple, the events blocks are yellow, and so on. So that really helps when you're putting code together, or if you're looking at somebody else's code and you're trying to find a block that they've used. Okay, so going back to the hippo now, we've said that we want the hippo to start here. We haven't told the hippo how to move yet, so that's the next thing that we're going to do. So if I go to motion, because we're talking about moving, last time in the maze game, we made our main character move by using the arrow keys. But in this game, we're going to be using the mouse pointer. So we're going to be saying that we want him to point towards the mouse. So that means he'll point towards my arrow. Can you see my arrow here that I'm moving with my finger on the screen? I'm moving that by moving on the mouse pad, and this hippo is going to be pointing towards it, but I also want him to then move in that direction. So we're going to choose the move block, move 10 steps. Now, if I click the green flag, he's facing my direction, and he's moved 10 steps in the direction of this arrow. But that isn't quite what we want to happen, because we want him to keep following the arrow. So we need to actually make that a loop so that he keeps pointing towards the mouse pointer and he keeps moving 10 steps. Now, if you did the last tutorial, you will remember that there is a block under control called the forever block. And this basically, we can use it to create a loop. So I'm going to grab these two blocks, the point towards the mouse and the move 10 steps, and I'm going to pop those inside forever. That means I want the hippo to forever point towards the mouse and forever to move 10 steps. So let's try that again. Press the green flag, and now you can see that he's following me like this. Woo! Okay, so he's doing that forever. Now you might notice that he's going a little bit crazy, like sort of flashing when I keep still, which will happen with this kind of control, but also that he keeps going upside down. So we've just got to edit that slightly. I'm going to press the stop button. Okay, so I'm going to make him move a little bit slower for a start, slightly smaller steps. So I'm going to say move 5 steps. Now if you watch, it's a lot calmer. I've got time to move my mouse and he can follow along like this. So you can choose whatever speed you want him to go at. I'm going to press stop now. We also need to change the direction. We need to change his orientation, so whether he can go upside down or not. So if we go back to motion, there is a block. Let me see if I can find it. I'm just going to go down. It says here, set rotation style. So you can choose, rotation is talking about spinning basically. So we're going to say we don't want him to spin. We want to set the rotation style as left and right. So I'm just going to pop that in my forever block as well. So that means that my hippo can only go left and right. He can't kind of spin round upside down. So now if I try it, you can see that the hippo follows me, but he doesn't spin upside down when I do this. He's not spinning, he's just going left and right. Okay, so that's a bit easier now. Okay, he will still flash like this when he's on the mouse because he's trying to look for he's trying to move basically towards the mouse, but he's already there, so every time he moves he kind of switches again. Anyway, so he's ready to go. There we go. He can move, he can go and collect gems, but obviously they're not moving yet, and he can hit the monster. Okay, so I'm going to press stop. If you want your character to go a little bit faster, just change that number. Instead of move 5 steps to move 10 steps or whatever you want it to be. So we can play around with that at the end by how we want the game to go. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get our monster moving. So I'm going to click on Frank next. And Frank's going to move differently to the hippo. Frank is not going to move by following my mouse, because that would be a bit weird, because then they'd both be following the mouse around. So we're going to get Frank to move automatically. So again, we're going to use a forever block. So I'm going to go to Control and choose forever, because when he starts moving, I want him to carry on moving. I want him to keep doing whatever movement he's doing. I'm going to go to motion, and I'm going to get him to glide, and I'm going to get him to glide to a random position. So I don't know where Frank is going to glide to. And at the moment we've said glide in 1 second to a random position. And because we've put the forever block, we're saying we want him to keep gliding to a random position. So if I press the green flag, you can see that Frank is just busy gliding around randomly to random positions, which is quite cool. And again, you can play around with how quickly or slowly Frank glides by changing this number. So feel free to pause and play around if you want to at any point in this tutorial, and then just play when you're ready to. Okay, so now I've set up my movement for Frank, and I've set up my movement for the hippo. I'm also going to set up my movement for the crystals. So we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did for Frank. Now, there is a really quick way to do this, and that is basically, if I go back to Frank, I can take this forever block and I can let go of it onto the crystal, and then I can take it again and let go of it onto my other crystal. And now if I click on the crystal, you can see it's just appeared here, and you can just pop it underneath and then go to the other crystal. Oh, that didn't work. Let's just check that again. So go back to this crystal. I'm going to drag this part and drop it onto here. And then click on this crystal, and you can see it's appeared. Okay, so that's a really quick way if you want the same programming. So now my crystals do exactly the same thing as Frank. They glide randomly to random positions. So I can just press the green flag for that, and you can see that they randomly move around. Okay, so going back to my hippo now. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going to be adding in our hippo lives and our hippo score. So this is where we add in a special block that's called a variable. And a variable is just something you want to measure. So in the game, we want to measure how many lives our hippo has, and we also want to measure what the hippo, how many gems the hippo has collected. So I'm going to click on variables. And this is really great because you get to choose what you want to measure. You can make your own variable. So I'm going to make a variable, and I'm going to start off by calling it lives, L-I-V-E-S. Are the lives for all sprites or just for this sprite? I'm only making lives for my hippo. So I'm going to press OK. And you can see at the top there it says hippo lives 0. If you don't want it to say Hippo1, if you want to call him something else like Hero or something, you can just change the name of your sprite down here. But I'm happy with Hippo1 lives, that's fine. Then I'm going to make another variable. So I'm going to have two variables. My other variable is going to be called gems. But if your hero is collecting apples or collecting something else, you can call it whatever you need to. Again, it's not for all sprites. It's just for this sprite that's going to be collecting gems. And you can choose where you want these to be on the screen. So I'm just going to have them right at the top like this. So Hippo lives on this side and the gems I've collected on this side. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to say what you want these measurements to be at the beginning of the game. So when the green flag is clicked, what do you want these measurements to be? So when the green flag is clicked, I'm going to set my gems to 0 because he hasn't collected any gems. And I'm going to, let me click on lives now. One sec, let me untick that. Oh, sorry, don't need to untick that. And I'm going to set my lives. You see you've got a drop down arrow here. That's it, lives. So I'm going to set my lives to 3. I'm giving my character 3 lives. It's up to you how many lives you want your character to have. Now you're thinking, why hasn't the lives changed on this screen? It's because we've said when the green flag is clicked, do that. So if I click the green flag, you'll see that those changes have been made. Just another thing to quickly point out while we're at this stage, there is a Save Now button up here. So if you ever decide that you're going to wander off and come back to it later, it should save as you go along, but it doesn't hurt to click Save Now every now and again just to make sure that your project is actually saved. So there we go. So when the green flag is clicked, we're setting the gems to 0, we're setting the lives to 3. And then we're going to say what happens to those lives and those gems when things happen in the game. So this is where we do something called making conditional statements. Okay, so we're going to go to control for our conditional statement, and we're going to choose the block we used last week, which is the if and then block. So if something, then something else. So what is it that's going to change our hippo's lives? Well, it's if the hippo touches Frank. So I'm going to go to sensing and I'm going to say touching. I'm going to say if touching, and I'm not talking about if touching the mouse pointer, I'm going to say if touching Frank. Now your villain might not be called Frank, your villain might be called Monster or Shark or whatever you've chosen. So click whatever your monster's name is. If touching Frank, then, and what do I want to happen if touching Frank? Now, last week when we did a conditional statement, we said if touching the monster, go to, and we sent the character back to the beginning. But today, we're not going to be sending the character back to the beginning. We're just going to be saying that we want the lives to change. So I'm going to go to control, sorry, not control, ignore me. We're going to go to variables, and we're going to change the lives. So at the moment it says change gems, but there is a drop down for that. So we're just going to put that in there, and we're going to change lives. We don't want the lives to go up by 1. We want the lives to go down. So what do you think we need to put instead of 1? That's right. We need to put -1 or -1 in there. So we're now saying if touching Frank, then change lives by -1. And we always want that to happen in the game. So that can go inside a forever block. We can stick it in the forever block that we've already got, because now we're saying forever, do all of these things. Okay, so we always want that to happen. If touching Frank, change lives by -1. Now there is a slight problem with this, and I'm going to show you what the problem is. I'm going to go and try and hit Frank so you can see what the problem is here. Sometimes when you're creating games, you will come across problems and you will have to troubleshoot those problems. That is something that happens all the time when you're producing things in programming. And when you solve a problem or work out what a problem is, it's called debugging the problem. So we're going to have a problem that we're going to have to debug. So let's press the green flag, and I'm just going to hang out over Frank here. Where is he? Except I don't know where he's going to move. Right, you can see what my problem is. Let me just stop it. I only touched Frank about 3 times there, but can you see my lives have gone down to -41? How have I got -41? So when this first happened, I thought, oh my goodness, that's a problem. Something's wrong with my programming. There's nothing wrong with the programming. It's just that we need to add something extra in here. Now, I wonder if any of you have worked out why these lives have gone down so much. It's because the hippo is touching Frank for quite a long time as Frank passes. So every time it thinks it's touching it again, it's not, it's still touching it, but it's going, as Frank's moving past the hippo, those lives are going -1, -2, -3, -4, -5 for the whole time Frank's touching. So all we need to do to solve this problem, if you want to try and solve it yourself, just pause now and have a little think about how you could do it. But if you want to hear my solution, carry on. The solution is we need a little wait block. So if we go to control, there's a little block here called wait. And if you say change lives by -1, and then wait for a very small amount of time, if we say 0.5, that's half a second. It's not very long, but just long enough for Frank to move away from the hippo, or the hippo to move away from Frank, before those lives go down again. Okay, so we're just going to test that out now by clicking on the green flag, and then hopefully you'll see that if I go over to Frank and just gently, I touched Frank once there, my life went down. Oh, Frank went past me and my lives went down. And again, if you move out of the way quickly enough, the lives don't go down too much. So obviously if Frank changes directions, then your lives are still going to go down, but generally your lives are only going to change by 1 or 2 as Frank goes past you. Now we've put that little wait in there. So that should be good now for the next part of our game. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to create some backdrops so that we can say if the lives equal 0, then we want the backdrop to change to game over. So to select your backdrop, you're going to hover down here and click on the paint tool. Okay, so you should have a brand new blank background opened up, and we're going to start off by putting some text in that to create our game over screen. So I'm going to go press the T for text and click where I want to type. You can change the color beforehand if you want to by clicking here. So actually let's do that. I'm going to go for red, and I'm going to make that really nice and bright. And then, yeah, right there in the middle, I'm just going to click and type game over, like that. And then underneath, I'm going to have some other text. I'm going to go for green next. Just before I do that, hold on, sorry. See, this has come up. You can just use that to resize slightly. And then you can move it to wherever you want on the screen. Or if that you can't see that blue box and you want to resize, just click that arrow, select. Then you can select it, move it, resize it. So just make sure you're happy with that. And then if you choose the next color that you want to use, I'm going to use, oh, hang on, I've got to click off it first. Sorry, click away from it. Now choose the color you want next. So I'm going to go for green for my next text box. Again, make that, I'm going to go nice and bright, and then click text, and then underneath I'm going to type in click the green flag to play again. And again, I just need to move that. So if it's not highlighted around the edge with the bit that you can move, just click that arrow to select and move it to wherever you want. Make it bigger if you want to, make sure it's nice and clear. You can see this checkered background. That just means that there's nothing in the background at all, but this is how it looks in the game over here. So you can see it's just plain white. So I'm going to keep it quite simple, but obviously if you wanted to spend a little bit more time on your backgrounds, you can always pause the video and do that. I'm going to change the name, so instead of backdrop 2, this is going to be called game over. It's important to keep the names of your backgrounds quite simple because you might need to type them later in your coding. So just keep it simple. I've done game over. It's easy to spell. I've kept it all lowercase, just with a space in the middle. And then I'm going to do another backdrop. So I'm going to go to here and click paint. And this one I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to be quick here. So I'm going to click to type. I'm going to type well done, you've won, like that. And I'm just going to make that bigger. Well done, you've won. And then again underneath, I'm just going to type click the green flag to play again. Oh, I've spelled again wrong. Again. If you go wrong when you're doing any parts of your backdrop, let's say you've done this bit and you didn't like it, you can just select it using this arrow and then hit the delete button on the keyboard and do that again. So if you go wrong at any point, don't worry, you can just change it slightly. There we go. You'll get used to it as well. Okay, so well done, you've won. Click the green flag to play again. And I'm going to call this backdrop win, just to keep it really simple. Okay, and click away from there and you can see it changes. So I've got stars, which was the one I was using at the beginning, game over and win. And this one that says backdrop 1 is just the one they gave me at the beginning. I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, so we've got 3 backdrops: stars, game over and win. So once you've done that, you're then going to click back on your hippo, and then you can click back to like that. You can see that the hippo has 2 different costumes here, which is quite cool. So you can make the hippo change costume by using the next costume button. There's a suggestion for doing this at the end of the tutorial, so you might need to come back and have a look at your character's costumes if you want to follow my suggestion. And if we go back to code now, we can carry on with the next part of our coding. Okay, so now we're back on the hippo and we need to do our next little bit of programming. So what we're going to do now is this conditional statement that says if the lives equal 0, then we want the backdrop to switch. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to control. We're going to find our conditional statement block that we've been using, which is the if and then block. And because we're talking about lives, we're talking about one of our variables. So we're going to go to variables and we're going to select lives. Now you can see that this lives block is an oval shape. It's not going to fit in here. So we can't just pop it in on its own. And actually we don't just want to say if lives then because that doesn't make sense. We want to say if lives equal nothing, then do something. So we're going to go to operators. And these are green ones are the operator blocks, and they allow you to work with numbers and also names and things like that. We're going to click on the one that says with the equals in it, and we're going to pop the lives in here. We're going to say if lives are equal to 0, and we're going to put that in there. So if lives are equal to 0, then, and now we can put in our switch backdrop. Now, I wonder if anybody can guess where we're going to find the switch backdrop. It's under looks, and that's because we're talking about the way the screen looks. So I've gone to looks, and you can see there's one called switch backdrop, and we're going to say switch backdrop 2, and we can select game over. Okay, so if lives equals 0, then switch backdrop to game over. Now we always want that to happen. We always want it that if lives equals 0, then the backdrop switches to that. And this doesn't work on its own. It can't just float. It needs an event on top of it. So we're just going to put it in our big chain with everything else. We're going to stick it under here, under the other conditional statement. So careful you don't put it inside the other conditional statement. It needs to go underneath it. Okay, so it's going right at the bottom here, inside the forever block. That forever block stretches to let it in, but it's underneath the other conditional statements. So we've got 2 conditional statements there. We've got one that says if touching Frank, change the lives by -1 and wait for 0.5 seconds. And then we've got another conditional statement that says if the lives equals 0, then switch the backdrop to game over. Now, because we're switching the backdrop to game over, we also need the backdrop to change back to the stars backdrop or whatever backdrop you've chosen when the game is played again, because if we lose now, the backdrop will change, and then when we click the green flag, it's still going to be on the you lose or the game over screen. So we just also need to put in a switch backdrop right at the top here. So when the green flag is clicked, switch backdrop to stars or whatever your original background that you chose was called. Mine was a starry background, but yours might be a different one. So let's just try this out now. I'm going to make sure I go past Frank let Frank get me and see if my lives go to 0 and the background changes. So I'm going to press go. Oh, there we go. He's gone past me once. There we go. Lost another life. Oh, lost all my lives. So now it says game over. Click the green flag to play again. So that's great. So we can see that that works. There is a problem though. You can see if Frank, the game is, although it says game over, the game is still carrying on. So we need to now make some more adjustments to our code. This is the way that I always do it when I'm creating things in Scratch. I put in some code, I put together some algorithms or some sequences of instructions, I try it out, see whether it works, whether it doesn't work, and then I decide what I need to do next. So the next thing I need to do is I need to make it so that when this game over screen is showing, that we don't still have our characters moving around all over the screen, because obviously that makes it look like the game is still in play. So there's a couple of different ways of doing this. I'm going to show you one of the ways, which is just to hide your characters and then make them show again at the beginning. So under looks, which I'm already on over here, you'll see that there's a block called hide and there's a block called show. So I'm going to bring the hide one first, and that's going to go right down here. If lives equals 0, then switch backdrop to game over and hide. Okay, so now my character will hide when the game is over. I also need to say that when the green flag is clicked at the beginning, that my character will show. So that goes right at the beginning. So when the green flag is clicked, show and switch backdrop to stars. I'm actually going to put that in the other way around. Actually, I'm going to say switch backdrop to stars and then show. Can you see how I pulled that apart? When you try and pull blocks apart, it pulls everything underneath it with it. So you like that, and then you have to do it like this and kind of switch them around. So you can pull things. Ooh, you can pull things from underneath, but you can't pull things off the top. I can't pull that show block off. Anyway, so I'd have to, if I wanted to move it, I have to take these like that, and then I can play around. So I'm going to do the backdrop change first, and then I'm going to get him to show, because if he shows before the backdrop's changed, then he will disappear again, because on the other backdrop we've said he hides. Anyway, so let's pop that like that. Okay, so we're all ready with that. We also need to hide Frank and hide the crystals when that screen is showing. So if I go to Frank, we can do exactly the same thing. We need another conditional statement. So I'm going to go to control. I'm going to say if. Now this is a little bit more tricky because we can't say if gems equals 0. If lives equals 0. We need to say if a certain backdrop is showing, then hide. So we need to find under looks, we need to find the block that's called backdrop name or backdrop number. So it's just here. Can you see that one? If backdrop number. Now again, this doesn't fit. We need the operator to go with it. So we're going to say if backdrop, and I'm going to change it to name, not number. I'm going to say if backdrop name is equal to, and you can see these operators don't just work with numbers, we can also type text in here. So if you remember a minute ago, I said when we created the backdrops, I said make it all lowercase, or I made mine all lowercase. So I'm going to say if backdrop name equals game space over. That's how I wrote it. So you have to make sure that you've spelt it and that you've got the same capitalization as your actual backdrop name. So if my backdrop name equals game over, then hide. So I'm going to pop that into there, and I'm going to find the hide block under looks and pop that in there. If you've forgotten what your backdrop's called, just click on stage and then go to backdrops, and you'll be able to see what your backdrops were called, and then come back to Frank and code to carry on. Again, remember this doesn't work when it's on its own. It needs to be put inside the forever block so that it always happens. So whenever the backdrop name equals game over, then the character will hide. But it's not just when the game over screen shows that we want Frank to hide. We also want Frank to hide when the winning screen shows. So I'm going to actually make this even more complicated. We're going to choose another operator, the equals one again, and we also want this or operator, and I'm just going to show you how to use those. Choose again, go to looks and go for the backdrop name one. So let's just scroll down. Backdrop number it says. So we're just doing the same as we did before, but instead of for game over, we're going to do it for you win. So backdrop number, we're going to change that to backdrop name. So backdrop name equals, and I called mine win. So have a look at what yours was called if you don't remember. So you should have had a winning backdrop and a game over or a you lose backdrop, and they were called something different. So I've got one that's called backdrop name equals win and one that's called backdrop name equals game over. And I'm going to use this or operator to put them both in the same space. So I can take this back out again and put it in this side. Ooh, see how it popped in there? So now it says backdrop name equals game over or backdrop name equals win. So I can pop that in here. Look at this massive bit of programming. So now it says forever if the backdrop name equals game over or if the backdrop name equals win, then hide. So I've basically done all my programming for that little bit talking about the hiding in one section. If backdrop name equals game over or backdrop name equals win, then hide. And I need to tell Frank to show at the beginning. So I'm going to put the show just under when the green flag is clicked. I don't need to say switch the backdrop to stars because I've already said that on under the hippo, so that will happen automatically. So you don't have to have the programming on both characters. So that should work. So let's just test that that works before we do it for the crystals. So or the gems. I'm going to press the green flag. So the backdrops change back to stars. Let's just watch Frank getting me. There we go. Game over, and Frank and hippo have both disappeared. So let's just check that if I press the green flag, they both reappear. Yes, they do. Okay, lovely. So that's worked. Now, we also want the crystals to disappear on those screens. And the great news is we do not have to type all of that again. What we can do, we can just take this little bit of code, the conditional statement, the if then, this part, and drag it down and let go of it on top of the first crystal or the first gem. And it just pings back to where it was. So if I click on crystal now, you can see it's appeared here. And I can pop that in my forever block. Okay, so now that crystal has got the same programming as Frank had. And I'm going to do the same thing again, drag it and put it on my other crystal like this, let go. And there we go, checking the crystal, it's there, and put it into position inside my forever block. And again, then you would test that out and make sure your crystals disappear and then reappear when you press start. I've already tested that in my last game, so I know that that works, but just make sure it does work if you want to. Okay, lovely. Now, so we've done that part. We also now need to talk about the gems. We need to talk about how you win the game, because we've already said how you lose the game, but we haven't yet told or programmed how the game is won. So I'm going to go back to my hippo. So I click down at the bottom here and you can see this is the hippo's programming. There's a lot of programming here for the hippo. We've been doing it all in one big block, but you can have multiple algorithms going on at once, like things that work alongside each other, if it's easier for you to have it in smaller blocks. But today we're having a go at doing it all together because it's more efficient. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to say how the gems go up. So what makes our gems go up and the score go up? Well, what makes them go up is touching them. So we need to do another conditional statement saying if we're touching the gems, then the number of gems or the score goes up. So I'm going to say if something, then something else. I'm going to say if touching crystals or if touching gems, so sensing, put the touching block in there. Now you might not have chosen gems, you might have chosen something else that you're collecting. So if touching, and choose whatever it is that you're collecting. So I'm going to say if touching crystal. Now I also need to say not just the first crystal but also the second crystal. So if touching crystal or crystal 2. So I actually need an operator block there so I can put both of them in it. So let's just pop that in that side. If touching crystal, or let's have another sensing block. If touching, see, I've got two the same, so I've got crystal and I've got one sprite called crystal 2, and we want both of them to have the same effect on the score. So if touching crystal or touching crystal 2, then, and then we want to change our gems variable, which we've got over here. We want to change the score. So I'm going to go to variables and I'm going to choose change gems by 1. So with the lives, when we were touching Frank, we had the score going down, so it was -1. But with the gems, we want them to go, the score to go up. So we're going to say change by 1 each time. And again, this needs to go in a forever block. We can just pop it under our last conditional statement, and that forever block grows to make room for it. So I'll just scroll down so you can see that. So I've got this was the last one. If lives equals 0, then switch backdrop to game over and hide. And then underneath it, I've also put if touching crystal or touching crystal 2, change our gems by 1. Okay, and then we need to say what's going to happen to make it win, and we can duplicate this little bit of code here. So if I just pull this out again so you can see it, I'm going to pop that bit. Oh, I'm going to pop this bit back in. There you go. See, I'm putting it carefully. Don't be careful not to put it inside the last conditional statement. Put it underneath it there. So we're looking at this bit now that we did a minute ago, where it said if lives equals 0, then switch backdrop. I'm just going to right click this and duplicate it. Okay, so we've got 2 of them, and I'm going to pop this one back in. It doesn't matter whether it goes underneath the last one or before the last conditional statement. Just pop that in there. Okay, so this is the one we're working on now. So instead of lives, we're now talking about gems. So I'm going to get rid of the lives button, and I'm going to pop my gems in there. Yours might not be gems, it might be apples or whatever you're collecting. And we're going to say if gems equals, and I'm going to go for 5. You've got to collect 5 gems. So if gems equals 5, switch backdrop to win. So that's how you're going to set it up, so that you've got the programming for winning the game as well. So we've got, this is the programming for losing the game. If lives equals 0, then switch to game over, and then if gems equals 5, switch to win. And I'm going to put this one in the forever block underneath the last one. Okay, so hopefully the programming for my game is pretty much done. I'm just going to double check. Did I make my crystals reappear again at the beginning of the game? No, I didn't. I just suddenly remembered that. So we made the crystals hide because we copied the programming for Frank, where we said if the backdrop equals game over or the backdrop equals win, then the crystals should hide. But we also need to say when the green flag is clicked that they show. So let's just add in that little bit of last little bit of programming there, and do the same for the other crystal or whatever you've got that you're collecting. Okay, lovely. So hopefully that should be most of our programming done. We'll just test out what we've got so far, and then the last thing we're going to do is just add in some sound effects just to make it even more cool. So I'm going to click on the green flag just to play what we've done so far. So I'm trying to avoid Frank this time. I'm going to try and actually win. Ooh. Oh, okay. So my gems went up really quickly. I touched 1 gem and I went up to 5. That's because we've got exactly the same problem we had before with touching Frank, where because you're touching it for a little while, the gems keep on going up. So we need to put a little weight in there as well. So if I scroll back down, can you see here it says if touching crystal or touching crystal 2, then change the gems by 1. We then need a little weight block so it doesn't keep changing the gems by 1. It gives you a chance to move away from that crystal, or the crystal to move away from you. Otherwise the game's going to be over rather quickly. So go to control, choose weight, and just drag that underneath where it says change gems by 1. Just pop in that weight block. And I'm going to make that a really small weight, just 0.5 seconds. And then I'm going to press save now just to make sure I'm all updated. And I'm going to press my green flag and try that again. Okay, so I'm going for my gems. Ooh, here we go. There you go. Got 1, 2, 3. Yes. Oh, no, don't get me. 4, Yes. Oh, 5. There we go. I did actually get 2 in 1 there when the gem went past me, but that's absolutely fine. Sometimes I think it's okay for that to happen. So it says, well done, you've won, click the green flag to play again. So my game works now. We know that the lives go down and the backdrop changes. We know that the gems go up to 5 and then the backdrop changes. The last thing we're going to do is add in some sound effects. So I want a sound effect for collecting the gems, and I want a sound effect for touching Frank. So can you see where it says sounds at the top here? That's what you're going to click on next. Okay, so I'm just going to click on sounds, and it thinks that my hippo wants to make the meow sound, but I don't, so I'm getting rid of the meow sound, and I'm going to choose a new sound from the bottom here. So where it says choose a sound, if you've pre-recorded your own sound, you can always upload the sound, but we're not doing that. We're just going to choose one. There's loads on here to choose from, so it makes it really fun. You can spend a little bit of time if you want having a look through and listening to the sounds just by hovering like this. When you find a sound that you like, now you might want to just use the same ones as me for now and come back later, or you can pause and do this part. I found a sound called collect. You can see I typed it in here and it came up. And that one's a really good one for like collecting your gems. So I'm going to click on that one. And then I found another really good sound. I'm going to click choose a sound. This one was called bonk. So I'm going to type in bonk. And there it is, bonk. So that's the sound I've got for when I touch Frank. So I'm going to click on there. So we've got collect and bonk. And now, because I've chosen both of these sounds, I'll be able to select them in my coding, in my blocks. So I'm going to click on code. And we have to look back through our code to see where we want those sounds to come in. So can you see where it says, if touching crystal or crystal 2, then change the gems by 1. It's when you're touching those crystals that we want that noise to play. So I'm going to go to sound, and I'm going to go for the play sound something until done. And I'm going to pop it just under here. So it says, if touching crystal or touching crystal 2, then play sound bonk until done and change the gems by 1. You can just change that to all of the sounds, any of the sounds that you've put in your sounds bank. So I chose these 2 sounds, but I'm going to use collect for my crystals. So now when I hit the crystals, it will play the sound collect, which is like a ching sort of sound. And then I'm going to put the bonk sound where it says if touching Frank. So just scroll until you see that part. Here it was, if touching Frank. And I'm going to say play sound, then play sound, bonk until done, and change the lives by -1 and wait 0.5 seconds. Okay, so that all of those things are going to happen in that statement. So if touching Frank triggers 3 things to happen. Frank, if I touch Frank, I get a sound, my lives change, and then it waits for a short amount of time. Okay, so let's press the green flag and just check that those sounds work. So let's go. Oh, yes, there we go. Oh, and bonk. Oh no, that's it, game over. Okay, so you can see that it all works. I'm pretty happy with the game. There are some suggestions coming up for other things that you could try and add if you want to. But today's tutorial is pretty much done. What I'd like you to do is rename your tutorial. So when I did it before, I called it collect the gems. This one I'm going to call collect the crystals. And then I'm going to press share. Now this, when you press share, it means that you're sharing it with the whole of the Scratch community, and it also gets its own web address. So this is my project number here. So if you wanted somebody to share your project with somebody in your family, you can copy this address and paste it and give it to them so that they can access your project on Scratch and have a look at it. You can also, once you've shared it, add it to studios. So if you go back to the Cartwheels and Creation Studio, then you can add in your game that you've just made to show other people that have also done this tutorial, and you can all play each other's games, which is a really nice feature of Scratch. You can also remix other people's games. It doesn't change their original game, but it allows you to play around with their game and make it one of your games. But if you ever do that and you remix somebody else's, make sure that you say in the notes and credits, thank you to whatever scratcher name it was. So thank you to Mrs. Diggy if you were thanking me, or thank you to whoever's game you've used for the great ideas, something like that. So if you've remixed somebody's game, it's nice to give them credit. If you've done it all from the beginning yourself, you don't really need to worry about notes and credits unless you want to. Don't forget to put your instructions in to tell people how to play your game, and then you're pretty much done. So I can add this directly to the Cartwheels and Creations studio down here. I can go to add to, and I can just add it to Cartwheels and Creations. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so thank you so much for coming along today. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. There are a couple of other programming with Scratch tutorials on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so that you're updated whenever we put new projects on. There will be another programming tutorial next Tuesday where we will be making our own virtual pets that we have to look after. So hopefully that will be really good fun. Hopefully I will see you guys then. Bye.